Hello, guys, and welcome to today's amazing episode on Research Hub. I'm your host on Dimas Academy. So, today we are going to be looking at result findings versus discussion of findings. This is another important part where most researchers often confuse the two, and especially in the aspect of discussion of findings. So many researchers do not know how to, distinguish between results and discussion of the findings of the results. So without wasting much of your time, we are going to dive straight into the research itself. So what is the meaning of findings? Now, findings refers to the actual data collected and analyzed in a study. It presents what was discovered without interpretation. Key features: 1. It focuses on facts, figures, and outcome. It uses table, charts, percentage, and statistics. It answers research questions only. No personal opinion or explanation. Now, if you have done a research and then you understand this very well, because once you do your data analysis, perhaps you do your statistical analysis and then you see the results. If the result is less than 0.05, then you can say, okay, it is statistically significant, depending on what you are trying to test. That is why we say it tests the research questions and the research hypothesis. So you can now see, since the result is below 0.05, then we can reject the null hypothesis and accept the alternate hypothesis, right? That meaning that, let's say, social media have impact on the academic performance of students, right? So this is just the result, but now you have not gone into explaining the result. That is why we just say this is the point. You cannot say the mean is accepted, the mean wasn't accepted. For example, 65% of the students agree that social media improves business performance. Mean score accepted at 3.8, right? But you have not gone forward to discuss it, right? So now let's look at discussion of findings. This discussion of findings means or explains the meaning and implications of the result. Now you have talked about the result, but you have not talked about the implications. This is where discussion of findings comes in. It connects findings to theories, literatures, and expectations. For instance, if you have done some research and then in your chapter 2, you must have discussed empirical literatures and empirical reviews, works of different scholars. Now, when you have now tested and you have seen your own result, with your result now you can now put it side by side and then juxtapose it with previous literature, previous theory, previous expectations. So this is where you discuss the implications of your findings. What does this mean to your research? That we agree to a particular test, or that this test is agreeable, what does it imply? So this is what you do on your discussion of findings. So key features is that you interpret and you explain the results, you compare it with previous studies, you show whether findings agree or disagree with previous literature. You understand? This is another place where you say, yes, although this findings is the same with so and so, or this findings agrees with let's say Anuebe 2005. You understand? Or it agrees with so and so 2006. This is the point where you agree or you disagree with the previous literature, right? So let's take an example. The high agreement suggests that social media is an effective marketing tool which supports the finding of previous studies that digital platforms enhance business visibility. You see? So it supports. So it either supports or it can also contrast with the previous literature. So let's move on. So in conclusion, you can say the findings, the summary of findings and the discussion of findings are both important sections in the research, but they serve different purposes. The summary of findings is a brief, direct interpretation of the major results of the study. It highlights key outcomes in specified and organized manner, often aligning them with the research questions on objective. It does not include explanations, interpretations, or comparison. Instead, it focused clearly on stating what was found in the research in a condensed form. So you are just stating what was found. That's the findings. But in contrast, the discussion of findings go deeper by interpreting and explaining the results presented in the study. It examines meaning of the findings, relate them to existing literature, extant literatures, and then explain why such results occur. So if you have been having issues with distinguishing between your discussion of findings, now it is very simple. Your results or your findings just shows the outcome of your analysis, and then your discussion of findings is where you now explain, compare and contrast between your current study and the previous study. That is to say, you do your comparison, you compare and contrast, and then you state the difference between your work and the other works, and then if it agrees, you now say it agrees with previous literature. So in essence, you are just doing an interpretation of the findings. So we'll stop at this point until we come again on your way. We still remain the Maths Academy. Stay tuned and make sure you subscribe and you continue to like and share our post. Thank you.